good evening, and welcome to, I think, the 19th annual candidate campaign forum that we've held here at the Elections Office. I'm really pleased with the speakers we have this evening. We actually ended up with a couple of additional speakers from prior years, and so we've had to cut them back in the amount of time a little bit. But I think at the end of the evening, I think you'll agree with me that it was a good decision to include all of our speakers. Really excited about the folks who are with us this evening. So I'm Greg Kimsey, the Clark County Auditor. It's been my honor and privilege to serve as County Auditor now for 19 years. So the purpose of this program is to provide information to candidates, prospective candidates, campaign workers, prospective campaign workers, or anyone who's really interested in the elections process. And we have, again, a wide variety of speakers. Be up here in the panel sessions. We'll have questions afterwards with hopefully answers from folks. And so with that, we'd like to keep on time. So with that, I'll invite our first speaker, Rick Kennison from the Washington State Department of Transportation. Come on up, Rick. Rick's going to talk to us about the, yeah, if we could hold our applause. I know Rick's really handsome, but if we could just hold our applause, we'll get through this a lot faster. Rick's been with WashDOT for 32 years, held a number of positions in the agency. Currently, one of his responsibilities is monitoring and enforcing sign laws. And of course, as you know, here in Clark County, signs are a big deal. So, Rick, take her away.
All righty. So I stand up here and
whatever works for you. I'll give you this though.
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you all for inviting me here. It's my pleasure to be here and help out with the understanding of signs on state highway right-of-way. First of all, I have handouts in the back. They're sitting on the table of my presentation I'm going to give here today. So help yourself to those. And just hope you all enjoyed the glorious day that we had out here, our one day of spring, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's go beginning with temporary political campaign signs on state highway right-of-way. State law specifies that all signs other than traffic control signs, state historical marker signs, or permitted highway motorist information signs are prohibited from installation within state highway right-of-way. This includes the temporary political campaign signs. So at least one of you here is probably wondering, why are they prohibited? The number one reason is safety. The Washington State Department of Transportation, we've teamed up with the Washington State Patrol for several years now. We've been going over what we call Target Zero, which is a campaign to reduce traffic deaths and serious injury accidents to zero by the year 2030. So currently, impaired driving, speeding, and distracted driving are the top three causes of these types of collisions. Distracted driving, of course, is a growing problem with all the cell phone usage and the multimedia barrage that we're all experiencing these days. And unfortunately, in this past year, statewide, these types of accidents actually went up again. So they were going down for years, and they've gone up again. And I think distracted driving has a lot to do with that. Highways on state right-of-way, other than the required traffic control signs that we put up, mentioned previously, only add to the element of distractions that drivers may experience on any given trip. If political signs were allowed within the right-of-way, there would be instances where such a sign could be installed in a manner that could block the vision of an important sign for a driver, such as a stop sign or a crosswalk ahead sign or anything like that, yield sign, because state highway signs are designed specifically for the driver as they're driving down the road at a particular speed, and they're spaced such that you can see one sign to another. Now, if we put signs in between those signs that are actually designed in that manner at that spacing, then you'll probably block another sign. Another instance is, say, a large political sign is placed at an intersection corner within the state right-of-way. That could block, say, a driver pulls up to the intersection, can't see around the sign, and misses a oncoming car or maybe a pedestrian or even a bicycle that's coming by the other way. The other thing is, once again, I'm talking about state highways. The RCWs are about state highways. You need to check, or you can check with your city or the county on what their regulations are on their roadways. This is state highways only. Another reason is it's tied to the Federal Highway Beautification Act for signing. The The basic premise of this act is that drivers should be able to enjoy their experience of driving without having to see human-placed signs everywhere. They can become a clutter, an eyesore, and drivers may even stop paying attention to the actual real signs, and so there's just so many out there. Who knows the 5-man electrical band? Probably these laws probably came out about the time when the signs everywhere signs that that came out. So I can imagine that's about what the feeling was at the time. Another reason that I was just thinking about is that signs on public right-of-way could be perceived by taxpayers as the state endorsing a certain candidate, and obviously we are a bipartisan agency and we do not endorse any specific candidate. Those of you that are interested in the laws that govern these policies, like Katie over here, Revised Code of Washington 47.42, and which is called the Highway Advertising Control Act, and the Washington Administrative Code 468-66-050, sign classifications and specific provisions are resources that these regulations come from. You could also check with each of the local cities and counties in your area, which I mentioned before. So, you'll probably hear, what is allowed? Temporary political campaign signs may be allowed on private property that's adjacent to state highway right-of-way. The RCW and the WAC states that temporary political campaign signs are identified as regulated Type 3 on-premise signs, intended to express a property owner's endorsement of a political candidate or initiative. So campaign signs, here's the real stuff, are allowed under the following regulations. Signs are limited to a maximum size of 32 square feet, which is the same size as a 4x8 sheet of plywood. Signs must be removed within 10 days following the election. Sign installers must have permission of the underlying property owner prior to placing the sign. And signs are subject to all other applicable provisions of the RCW and the WAC pertaining to Type 3 on-premise signs, if you want to look those up. So some of the questions that we receive are regarding, like, where exactly is the highway right-of-way line, because it's really not clear to everybody. Typically, for our limited access freeways and stuff, it's the fence line on the highway itself, especially along I-5, I-205, Highway 14, Highway 500, and 503 north of Brush Prairie. If there is no fence, power poles are often a good indicator, as they're typically on or very near the right-of-way line, as far away from the roadway as possible. And that's not always the case, so probably the best thing to do is call me. I have my numbers on the back sheet of this handout, and I have sign experts, and we have right-of-way experts in our office that can look up the right-of-way for you at any given location on a state highway. So pretty easy to do for us. And signs cannot be placed on the right-of-way fence or hanging over from the fence into the state right-of-way. Some common things that we see that are not allowed by these regulations. See these a lot. Signs visible to the state highway, they're obviously over 32 square feet. Most of them are. I mean, it looks like it's a pretty standard sign that you see out there, the sheet of plywood. Signs that resemble official traffic control devices. This is a really high priority no-no. And it looks like it might be clever to put a sign that looks like a stop sign or something like that, but that could just really screw up a driver, and you just don't want that to happen for safety reasons. People are bundling a bunch of signs together on one sign face. And remember, single signs are 32 square feet maximum. Kind of, I think some of the questions last year, can we stack two 32 square foot signs on top of each other? I would say my perception of that would be no. That looks like one big tall sign, and that's more of a distraction to the driver. Now, if they're side by side on a single structure and not touching each other, who's to say that they're not single signs by themselves? People hanging signs off of freeway overpasses, not allowed. And it says here, people standing in place on freeway overpasses and waving signs at passing motors below. I've seen people doing that. I don't think that that's highly enforced, but it's just another distraction for the drivers, so think about that. So Finally, if signs are placed illegally on state highway right-of-way, WashDOT maintenance staff will remove the signs that are on state right-of-way. They will mark them and keep them for about 30 days. If not claimed, they will be recycled. If claimed and they show up on the right-of-way again, they will recycle them immediately the second time. So my staff and I are available in assisting you with locating signs, where state right-of-way, where city jurisdiction ends. We can help you with any questions you have like that. So my contact information is on the back. That's all I have.
If we see a sign that we think is in the right of way or is a problem, do we call you?
Sure.
Okay.
I won't go out and take it out, but we do have folks. It's not, they're not their highest priority because they got a million things to do, our maintenance folks, but they will eventually go. And there's some locations around where you don't really know where the right of way is. One location I can think of is I-5 near the Bonneville Power Station area where Highway 99 kind of connects. We own a huge area there, the state does, but you wouldn't know. So there's been over the years, maintenance has taken signs down that are placed there. But, you know, maybe we should do a better job of letting you know.
What I was thinking of in particular was on the pavement side of the guardrail.
Yeah, no, that's not good. Yeah, tell me where it's at. And
That was 2 years ago.
oh, okay.
I'm noticing signs on exit ramps,
Yeah.
where the exit gets right to the main artery or
Right.
off the highway.
Right.
Is that not an area that should be?
It's probably still within our right of way.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, okay. The question is on highway off ramps. He's seen some signs that look like they're within the right of way, and if it's within state right of way, yes, they will be removed. We have limited access that goes up around the corner, which means no driveways are allowed within a certain number of feet from the off ramp. I'll have to double check to see if that's our jurisdiction or cities or counties. Anybody else?
Well, Rick, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, and appreciate you putting your phone number out there so people can contact you.
Believe the calls I get.
Also, as Rick mentioned, you know, he's really talking about state stuff, but local, unincorporated Clark County as well as the cities have their own rules and regulations. You'll find information about that in the candidate guideline book that we'll be talking about later. So with that, now we're going to try a little bit of technology. We have Jennifer Hansen, who's a filer assistance specialist. I think that's a great title, isn't it? A filer assistance specialist with the Public Disclosure Commission. And given the budget constraints the state's under, they no longer are able to physically be with us, but we're Skyping her in. Here she is. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
I can hear you guys just great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much for accommodating me via Skype. Although I do like Clark County, I would love to drive down there. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you guys today just briefly about filing requirements. I did look to see what offices were up this year, and I noticed that there were a few that are too small or are otherwise not required to file any reports with us at all. You've got some cemetery districts on the ballot, it looks like, and then at least one town that is too small. You guys have less than 1,000 registered voters. In the town of, and I apologize, I'm probably going to say it wrong, but Yakult is too small to be required to file anything. So most of the information I'm going to give to you is going to apply to everybody else. So the first thing you need to know when you're deciding what you need to file with the PDC is what makes you a candidate. And so we have a definition in our statute, and it includes raising or spending funds, authorizing someone else to do that for you, reserving space or purchasing advertisement, or authorizing someone else to do that for you, publicly announcing that you're going to run, which includes filing a declaration of candidacy. And so the first parts of those things, the raising or spending funds or reserving space, purchasing advertisement or public announcement, those are things that can happen before filing week. And so we do have several candidates on that have already registered with us. And as you get ready to do your candidacy filing with Clark County, you may find that you already have opponents that have registered with the PDC. Some of those people aren't going to go ahead and file a declaration. Some of them may go ahead and do that. On our website, we have a list of those candidates, and every day when people file, that list gets updated, which I think is similar to probably what Clark County does as well. They update the list of people who have filed with them. We have something matching now. Once you decide that you are a candidate, that you are have met that definition, then you have to determine what you have to file with the PDC. And so we're looking at how many registered voters are in the jurisdiction that you're running in. County-wide offices require both a financial affairs statement, which is that F1 that you probably are mildly familiar with, and the C1, which is a candidate registration. And so I mentioned that the town and then the some of those jurisdictions in your county might be too small to have to register with us. There's a couple different thresholds there. One of them is 1,000 registered voters. So if you're in a jurisdiction that has less than 1,000 registered voters, and you're not planning on raising more than $5,000 for your campaign, you have no filing requirement with us at all. You file with the county to get your name on the ballot, and then you're done. If you reach that, if you're in a jurisdiction that's above 1,000 registered voters, but less than 5,000, then you have to file at least the financial affairs statement, and that's the F1 form. And then if you're in those larger jurisdictions, 5,000 or more, then you also have to file the C1. So you've got kind of a couple different tiers there. And it looks like you guys might have all three tiers in your county this year for the different kinds of jurisdictions that you have. The financial affairs statement is a conflict of interest statement. If you are concerned about information being made available to the public, I would suggest that you look at that form first. Almost everything that you file with our office here at the PDC is made available to the public, including that financial affairs statement. And that F1 includes information about your personal income, real estate, and other assets and investments. We do not post it to our website, but people do sometimes have concerns about the kind of information that we're making available. So take a look at that. I think you're going to find that you're not going to be as providing as much information as you actually might believe. Those of you that are already elected officials have hopefully already filed an F1 as an elected official by April 17th of this year. You don't have to file another one to run this year as a candidate. So if that applies to you, you only have to file one. The C1 is that other form I mentioned. That's your candidate registration form. The C1 is what tells us and the public what office you're running for. So it has very similar information to your declaration of candidacy, but it's filed with us, and it's how we are able to follow the money that you're raising and spending for your campaign. We ask you to identify who it is that's working with you to get you elected. So if you have a treasurer or other community officers, you're going to include that information on the registration. We ask you to include information about where your bank is going to be. You do want to consider opening a bank account for your campaign. If you're going to accept contributions from outside sources, so you're not going to self-fund, you are required to open a bank account to put those funds into. We also ask you to identify information about how much money you're going to raise or spend for your campaign. There's two different reporting options. You've got mini reporting, which allows you to raise and spend up to $5,000 total for your campaign, not including your filing fee and not including your, that does include your own funds. If you're going to self-fund, that $5,000 would be included in that $5,000 total. And it also limits how much money you can accept from outside sources. So if somebody, that dollar amount threshold is set at $500 in the aggregate. So if someone says to you that they want to give you a $700 contribution, you wouldn't be eligible for mini reporting. If you're going to go with the other reporting option, which is full reporting, you're able to raise and spend more than that $500 per person and more than $5,000 total. Most of you that are in the Clark County area this year running for office are going to have contribution limits, but not all of you. So if you're going with full reporting, you can raise more than $5,000 total, and you can get more than 500 from one source. However, you might have some additional contribution limits to apply as well. So city council candidates, any of those city council or mayor candidates, you guys all have a $1,000 per election contribution limit. So each individual can give you no more than $1,000 for the primary and $1,000 for the general election. You've also got, taking a look here, looks like you guys had some school board offices that were up this year as well. They also have that same $1,000 per election limitation. And then you've got some others, fire commissioners and port commissioners. You guys don't have contribution limits in the same, they don't apply the same way. The only limitations you guys would have is during the 21 days before the general election, there's a general limitation on all contributions that come into candidates. It's no more than $5,000 in the aggregate during those 21 days. So for those of you that already have contribution limits, the city folks and the school board members, or school board candidates, you guys already have that $1,000 contribution limit. Remember, that doesn't apply to yourself as the candidate giving to your own campaign, but that $5,000 limitation within the 21 days before the general election, that would apply. So you've got that information there. In addition, if you're going to go with full reporting, you have to look at whether or not you are going to be required to electronically file your campaign reports. So full reporting campaigns, you're going to spend more than $5,000 and raise more than $5,000, or you want to get more than 500 from one source. You're looking at the possibility of being required to electronically file, and that's based on how much money you actually spend. So if you spend $5,000 or more for your campaign, you're required to electronically file your campaign activity. That does mean that you will be not only required to tell us and the public about your campaign contributions that you get and deposit into your bank account, but you're also going to be required to tell us about other things, expenditures, in-kind contributions. If somebody gives you a good or service instead of money, you're required to disclose that information. Pledges, debts and other obligations, loans, including candidate loans, all throughout the entire campaign. So if you're going to go with that full reporting, be prepared to have more disclosure requirements put upon you. It is a good idea to have somebody else assist you with your filing requirements. You can act as your own treasurer if you want, but it is difficult to meet all those deadlines and get yourself elected at the same time. So I do suggest that you try to find somebody who can assist you. We have information on our website regarding all of this. So if you go to our website, which is, you probably have this information in front of you already, but it's www.pdc.wa.gov. If you use the Learn tab on our website, that'll give you access to forms, our publications, which include the instruction manual for candidates and for the financial affairs statement, the F1. It also gives you information on contribution limits, which I discussed, and candidate loans, the documentation that you need to keep when you're making a loan to your own campaign. It also includes information about political advertisement. So I know that you guys were going to speak. Actually, I think you already spoke about the campaign signs. Just before me, I think is when Rick was speaking about the campaign signs in the Department of Transportation. So he probably spoke about where you could put signs and the timing when you could post them and where they could be placed. Our agency deals with what's actually on the signs themselves. So we tell you what you can and can't have on a sign as far as whether you're running for a partisan office or not, and the language that you need to include on political advertisement. So yard signs are one of the most common ways to advertise your candidacy. Yard signs that are 8 foot by 4 foot or smaller, so your typical yard sign, need to have party preference on them if you're running for a partisan office. So if you're running for one of the nonpartisan offices that you guys have, you're not required to put any kind of party preference on there at all. In addition, most political advertisement, so you're trying to solicit support somehow for your campaign, need to disclose who is paying for or sponsoring that particular advertisement. Yard signs are one of the things that's exempt from that sponsor ID. So I'm talking about the language that you might see sometimes or hear that says this ad was paid for by or sponsored by, and it's followed by the name and address of the sponsoring or paying party. Sometimes that's you, it's your own campaign. Sometimes it's an outside entity that's paying for that advertisement for you. There's several things that are exempt from having to disclose that sponsor information, and yard signs are one of them. So, one of the things that has come up a lot this year is detailed information about what's disclosed on the financial affairs statement, so the F1. Take a look at that if you're new to filing that report. Make sure that you collect all the information that you need. Do contact the PDC office if you have questions about what's required. We have had several people look into those forms a little bit closer and try to make sure that everybody is completing it properly. The forms that I mentioned that are required to be filed, the F1 and the C1, your candidate registration, and then all of your campaign reports, all of them can be filed electronically. The C1 and F1 can be filed on our website. We have a free electronic filing software that you can use. It's called ORCA, Online Reporting a Campaign Activity. It's free and can be downloaded from our website. We have staff here on hand that can assist you with filing those reports. All of those things can be done electronically without having to mail anything to us. You no longer have to do a wet signature. And we also have training available. I apologize, our training for May and the training in June is already full. Otherwise, I would mention to you that you should come to one of those trainings. We are trying to add some additional training and make some videos available on our website, but right now our in-house training, our Olympia training is full. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to participate in this manner to give you the same kind of basic information. Do try to take a look at our website. I will be sending out reminders to all the candidates that register and file with us to help you meet those deadlines as they come along throughout the campaign. We have a calendar on our website up in the top right hand corner. It's called, there's a link called Important Dates, and you'll see a calendar of upcoming events. Take a look at that. There's several different options for you to be able to find the information that you're looking for on what's required of you as a candidate and the due dates for those different requirements. So I think I'm done with my piece unless there's something in particular. I think we could open up for questions. I'm a little bit early, it looks like, but I think I'm done.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Extra points for brevity. Good for you. Thank you. So if we have any questions, go ahead.
I want to put some money into my own campaign. I can either lend it to the campaign or donate it to the campaign. What are the implications of each?
So Jennifer, if I could, I'd like to repeat that for our CVTV viewers. So the question is advantages, disadvantages of lending money, of the candidate lending money to their own campaign or donating money to their own campaign.
So thank you for that question. So what I tell people is it's easiest to spend other people's money. That always gets a little bit of a chuckle, but it is true. As the candidate, you are able to spend your own funds on your campaign you're able to be reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenditures, and you're able to loan money to your campaign and be reimbursed at a later date. And so you've got kind of a couple different things going on. If you decide as a candidate that you want to actually put money into your own bank account, you can treat it as a contribution from yourself to your campaign, or you can treat it as a loan. There is a loan repayment limit. It's no more than $6,000 per election. And so that per election piece, just to clarify, is you get a $6,000 limitation for the primary if your name appears on the primary ballot, and another $6,000 for the general election. If you decide to reinvert to loan money to your campaign, you do have to keep a little bit of documentation. So we have a publication on our website, again, under that Learn tab, that talks, or a brochure, I should say, that talks about the documentation you need to keep for candidate loans. You have to keep that information, and then you're eligible to repay yourself throughout the campaign, or even at the end of the campaign. You can collect additional funds to pay yourself back. It's really important to remember that if you don't list this as a loan, and there isn't that documentation identifying this as an actual loan, you are not eligible for repayment. So do keep that in mind, and be diligent about reporting things as loans. Your other option is you can pay for things out of your own pocket, so you can purchase things. Those are considered either in-kind contributions, so it's the same as someone else purchasing something for you, or they can be treated as an in-kind loan, and that contribution or that loan repayment limit is the same. So $6,000 applies to either cash loans or in-kind loans. In between those two options, you have the option of reimbursing yourself. So if you're coming up against a fundraising event is coming up soon, but you need a little bit of money to pay for some cost before then, you could go and pay for something out of your pocket and then be reimbursed within 21 days of that expenditure and not have it count towards your loan repayment limit. So there's that option as well. So you've kind of got three different options as the candidate. Those contribution limits that I mentioned earlier, they don't apply to yourself as the candidate, but there is that loan repayment limit.
Excellent. Another question.
Where do we report that, the loans? Is it on the reporting form itself?
So the question is, where are the loans reported to the PDC and to the public?
So when you're reporting a loan, you're actually going to create a Schedule L that goes along with your reports. So again, I'm talking about full reporters who are required to file C3 and C4 reports with us. The Schedule L shows loans. It shows new loans, whether they're cash loans or in kind, and it shows the loans that are still owed. So each time that you go to file a report disclosing the activity for that particular time period, you're going to disclose any new loans you have and any pre-existing ones. You also will show the payment of those loans as you go along, and those payments are shown up on a Schedule A. The Schedule L goes with either the C3 report showing a cash loan, or with the C4 showing an in-kind loan or a pre-existing loan. And the Schedule A shows expenditures for those loans. If you're doing electronic filing and you're using ORCA, there's a section in ORCA to identify new loans, and then you go back and you actually make the payment to those loans in that same section of ORCA. You can forgive loans as well, and those, when you forgive a loan, that loan then becomes a contribution to your campaign.
Good. Other questions? So I want to just add that in my experience, the Public Disclosure Commission is an extraordinarily helpful agency. The people there are much more interested in trying to help you stay out of trouble than to find that you are in trouble. So I would just really encourage, if you have any questions whatsoever regarding the requirements that Jennifer's talked about this morning, first go on the website. They have really lots of good information. Come on up, you guys. And if you still can't figure it out, man, don't hesitate to give them a call. It might take a little while to get through on the phone, but when you do get through, you'll find someone who's really, really helpful and really knowledgeable. So Jennifer, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Good luck.
Thank you. Another question? Oh, okay, good. So before we start, I should have mentioned earlier how much we appreciate the sponsorship of the Columbian of this event. They've been providing advertising for this event for many, many years. They've done that again this year. And so just want a big shout out to the Columbian and their co-sponsorship of this program. So we've gone through a couple of kind of nitty-gritty technical things, and now we're going to get to what I think of kind of the fun part of it, which is how do you run a campaign? How do you decide to be a candidate? So really pleased to have two people here can speak on that issue very well. First, we have Jane Van Dyke. Jane is currently serving as a Clark Public Utility Commissioner. Just so happens that Jane is the person who first got me involved in politics in any way whatsoever when I doorbelled for her in 1984. Yeah, John wasn't even born then, were you, John?
I was born 1 year before that.
And John Blum, who has a remarkable resume for a person who was only slightly born in 1984. John was born here in the Portland area, graduated from Leadership Clark County in 2004. 2005 was, help me out here, John, lost your biography.
2015.
Oh,
Marshall
2005 Marshall Youth Leadership Award, 3 years on the Clark County Planning Commission, and then last year, in his first attempt at elected office, went for the big ball and was elected Clark County Councilor. So, Jane and John, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'm starting right. So John and I met 10 days ago or so and kind of divided things up and are going to talk a little bit about ourselves and then how our backgrounds a little bit and then making our decision and then some of the things we want you to know. So I was going to call myself an accidental politician, and I was going to reference Greg because I think his comment to me was a long time ago, if you get reelected, you're a politician. Before that, I guess you're just a candidate and hopefully an elected office holder. But I grew up in a non-political family, and I don't think I had ever any indication I would ever run for political office. As I was growing up, we were very community-minded and involved in lots of different things in our church and in our community. When I went to college, I was involved in the recycling club and things like that, but never involved in student government. I graduated from law school college and then went on to law school, and many of my law school colleagues, and maybe that's one thing about being an elected official, there's many lawyers in that. Those two things go together. But many of my fellow law students knew all about Watergate and Richard Nixon, and I hardly knew anything about that because I wasn't even a political science major. But I got involved in energy issues back in college, and that, of course, led to, when I moved here to go to law school, getting more involved in energy issues. In 1980, a really big thing happened in Northwest called the Regional Power Act, which I was engaged in promoting conservation, proverbially met the few people, went to a meeting. We were writing an energy plan for the county, met a few more people. It was the time back when energy stuff was really changing. Electric rates were going way up, and there's a lot of people involved, and ratepayers very engaged in the community. So I met a lot of people. So I think that is something you want to share is like, how do you get there is just, my interests, they coincide with what was happening and had the opportunity to be encouraged to run for office. Didn't know much about it, but was guaranteed I'd have a lot of support. And I should say, for those of you who were barely alive then, I did win my very first campaign. I spent a lot less money than you will today, but served three full terms as a PUD commissioner, chose not to run for re-election, went on to work full-time, and then came back 3 years ago now and re-ran. We run by district, as the county councilors do, so you have to live in your district. So there's also that timing thing to think about as well. Do you live in the right place? Is it the right time for you? And with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you. So, listening to your story, Jane, very similar background. Not a very political family, and I was always much more interested on the policy making side than on the political side. I have a degree in history and was kind of actually deliberate in that, and then my goal was to get a job working in Washington, D.C., doing policy analysis, either for a think tank or the State Department, something along those lines. But life sometimes throws you curveballs. Got a job right out of grad school working for the Combat Studies Institute for the Army at Fort Leavenworth. So went there and was kind of enjoying life, and everything was good. And then my wife said, I miss the Pacific Northwest. Let's move back home. So did that, and with that came the need for a career change, and so decided to get into real estate and kind of set policy and all that stuff that I'd kind of gone to school for and was passionate about to the side for a couple of years. And I thought I'd set it aside kind of for good. I had no real thoughts of ever running for office, and thought, okay, I'm just going to do something different. A couple of years into my real estate career, it came out to someone in my office that I had kind of an interest in policy. And Linda, who was a former president of the local association of realtors, I would say she invited me to come to the local realtors government affairs committee, but that'd be kind of an understatement. She basically grabbed me and dragged me and said, "You're coming to this meeting whether you want to or not." And that just reignited kind of the political bug for me. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. You get to look at policy. You get to see how local things influence, my career and the clients that I'm working with, the people that I'm with every day, showing them houses and things like that. So got kind of re-involved and re-engaged in policy and politics through that. I think something that everyone that runs for office, a common illness or disease, is an inability to say no. So I served in that committee for 2 years and said, "John, you should be the chair." And I said, "Okay, sure, I'll do that." And then someone said, "You should apply for the Planning Commission." I said, "Well, okay, I guess I'll do that." So I applied for the Clark County Planning Commission and was fortunate and blessed enough to be accepted to that. And did that for a couple of years, and the bug just kind of kept growing and growing. And then in 2015, Greg mentioned the Marshall Award. And through that process, I got to know Larry Smith a little bit. He was one of the committee members that gave out that award. And so as he was retiring, he said, "John, I'm not going to run for re-election on the city council. I think you should consider running for that spot." And at the time, I was like, okay, I hadn't really ever thought of running for office, but I'm kind of overwhelmed that you, who've had such an incredible career of serving our community, would ask me to think about that. So I sat down and went through some of the processes that Jane and I are going to talk about, and ultimately decided that it wasn't the right time and it wasn't really the right position for me. So said, respectfully, I'm very honored that you would consider me someone that could fill your seat and would like me to run, but I'm not going to do it at this point. And kind of just set that aside. And, there's a lot of conversations, and we're going to talk about some of this decision of running, between my wife and I, and is this the right time for our family? I decided not to run. But then the next year, some other people came forward and said, the county council really needs someone to run for this position. Would you consider running? And went through a lot of the same processes that we're going to talk about and decided, things have changed in terms of where our family was at, things have changed in terms of career. And this really is the right time now and the right position. That was a big part of it, not just the timing, but also the position at the county was far more interesting to me because of where my interests lie than the city. So made the decision last year to run and had a great campaign staff. Jim Main said I had to mention him at least once, and if he said twice, he was going to buy me a beer afterwards. So Jim Maines ran my campaign. That's twice I mentioned you. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to be elected, and am enjoying serving Clark County now.
So the first topic we chose to talk about was identifying and finding your support. And I think we both mentioned it, and John mentioned his spouse, and I asked my spouse, what should I talk about? He says, don't forget to say, talk to your spouse. And certainly it's really such a commitment from not only yourself, but for your family, your closest friends, your friends who are going to become your closest friends, because you really want to have a good little key group of people that you can not only rely on to go to parades with you, doorbell with you, as Greg mentioned, but also just to be your sounding board. what does this phrase sound like? There's lots of opportunities to speak at forums, especially if you run for the more general purpose government, city council offices, county council, those positions, as opposed to a more subject matter like the PUD or the port. But you still need people who can tell you, are you making sense to people? The utility stuff sometimes, people don't even know what the issues are, let alone what the difference is between the candidates. And you need people to help you hone your message and also to be there to support you. We'll always date you thinking of the things. I remember sitting, we used to mail letters to the people that requested an absentee ballot. Okay, not happening anymore. Everyone gets their ballot in the mail, but you could get that list, you could mail to them. We sat in our living room, signed those letters, put them, sealed them, put them in the mail. But there's things now you want people to help you with, whether it be posting to Facebook, whether it be helping you do events, but just you really need that core group of people, a few beyond your family who understand you, are willing to be with you, early in the morning, going out on weekends, putting up signs. There's just all kinds of things that you need support for, and of course, hopefully to give you a little bit of money too.
And you need at least one person with a truck. You got to know someone with a truck. That's critical to the campaign. So
Sometimes you can just deal with the station wagon.
or a station wagon. As long as you can fit a 4x8 in the back of it, you're good. But you got to have at least one
on the
big
top,
vehicle
yeah.
or on the top. There you go. One of the most valuable things I think for me in doing this was having a really, frankly, a brutally honest self-evaluation with yourself, ideally your campaign manager, and a group of people that know you well. And that should be a group that is a diverse group in terms of people that at least one coworker, someone that knows you personally, if you're involved in boards or things like that, someone that served on a board with you, and people that can be brutally honest and tell you the things that you normally in polite conversation wouldn't say to someone else. I got to go through this twice, and it was fun both times. And people that aren't going to come out to be mean, but are going to be 100% honest with you with, here's one of your weaknesses, and here's sometimes how you come across. And sitting down and having that discussion very early on, we did it in my living room, and just sat around and kind of everyone around and talked and said, here's your strengths. You start with that, so you feel good about yourself. And then you move on to here's some of your weaknesses, and here's how sometimes you come across when someone annoys you, and it shows on your face. It was one of the things that I heard. But doing that self-evaluation, even before you make the decision that, yes, I'm absolutely, going to run, was really important, not just for thinking about your campaign and how you're going to come across, but just there's going to be a lot of stuff thrown at you during the course of the campaign. And if you can't handle hearing from your friends some of your shortcomings, the campaign's going to be pretty brutal and pretty hard on you to deal with emotionally. So I think having that self-evaluation really early on, so one, you can kind of work on some of those things and be aware of, you may feel you come across one way, but if other people perceive you come across differently, perception is reality. So when you're talking to voters and you think you're being friendly, but your friends say, when you're annoyed, you roll your eyes a lot, and you might not even know that you're doing that, but just being aware of that so you can think about it, then you won't do it when you're out doorbelling and asking for those votes. So I think doing that self-evaluation really early on and having people that know we're going to be there to support you. And you also find out, who are going to be your really big supporters and who are going to be your backers, the people that'll go out and work with you and work for you in the campaign.
Great, thanks. And I certainly echo that. I mean, that's really really great advice to think about your how you come across to other people and really think deeply about that. We also wanted to talk a little bit about thinking through the implications of your campaign. A campaign, even though you're not running for president of the United States, it's still a dang long time when you start making your announcement, hopefully because you've thought about it and you're willing to step out and make that announcement. So it might hopefully happen, if it hasn't already, even before filing week. So there's lots of time and effort. I think of the summer of 2014 as the summer we didn't really have a summer because you were going to so many different events. You were working on hosting organizing a fundraising event, you were calling people to ask for funds. There's just a lot of time, and you have to be willing to devote that time and effort to going out, whether it be events that you're invited to or things that are happening that dot your calendar, and then also just being disciplined enough to have your own calendar of doorbelling the precincts that you identify as the ones that you want to cover, and it can take quite a while, even if you're just going and talking to the people identified, as I did, just good voters, because I ran for a nonpartisan position. So I think it's really important to think about the time it's going to take, and also, you know, it may be a little early and to think about like what happens when I win, but if you're going to put all the time and effort that it takes to run for office, you want to be sure you're going to like being an elected official. So John and I both commented to each other like, oh yeah, you should think about what it's like to be an elected official. Are you going to be happy to see letters to the editor written about you? Are you going to be happy to have people call you up and ask you to help solve their problems? Are you going to be happy having people come to at a meeting that you're running to tell you how wrong you are about an issue? So I think we have a little different, we each told a story, because I said when I was running one of the early times, you know, you had your name out on the yard signs, and it was a pretty small campaign, but I felt like every time I turned around, of course, I was always checking, is that sign still up, or, you know, were my opponent's sign up, but I felt my name was out there, and, you know, there was a few stories in the Columbian, and yet there I went to the grocery store, wrote a check, back in the day, and the person didn't even recognize who I was. And I thought like, whoa, okay. But then John said, oh yeah, he sent out a flyer, maybe you should tell your story, and he thought people were like at the store recognized him. But are you willing to give up a little bit of that of privacy, I would say, to be out there and be a community member? Because as an elected official, not only do you want to do a great job for the organization you're elected to, I think you'll want to also spend time going out, going to other community events, being in the community, because I want to hear what people think about Clark Public Utilities, whether I'm at the fair, whether I'm at a fundraising event for a nonprofit organization, because I think you want to say, I am serving the community, both not only at my position, but in total into the community.
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to share is just thinking about the impacts it's going to have on every aspect of your life, you know, financially, depending on what position you're running for and what the time commitment is, both to run the campaign and then to serve in office. You know, you may be required to take more time off of work, or it may mean that you're going to miss out on opportunities for promotion because you have a certain amount of commitments because of the office that you're elected to. So thinking about why is it that you're running, what is it that makes you want to put yourself through this long process of a campaign, because it is a long process, and is that going to be worth the things that you may have to give up financially in your career? I mean, it definitely puts, or it can put a pause into where you're at. You know, what is the impact going to be on your family? You know, what are your kids going to think seeing you on the paper on a regular basis? And again, it depends on the position. But yeah, the loss of anonymity is something that I didn't really think about before. And the story that Jane alluded to, right after one of mailers went out and went to, I think we sent it to 15,000 people, all in East Vancouver. I think all of them were basically in Costco one particular day right after that went. So my wife and I are walking around, and I was wearing shorts and a T-shirt. It was a Saturday afternoon in August. It was 90 degrees. And I saw like 4 or 5 people that I saw like kind of look at me and then do that kind of that double take look where, you know, they're, you know, like feel like they recognize you. And it was a really kind of awkward, strange feeling of I can't just be anonymous and go to the store anymore. Like I'd think, okay, there could be a potential voter that's going to look at me. And depending on, you know, if my 5-year-old girl is screaming at Costco, am I going to lose a vote over that? And you would hope not, but you never know. And you become very self-conscious on all these things. So think through all the implications on your life. So is this the hook? The very polite hook. The Oscar music is going to come on in a couple minutes here.
But we do at least a few minutes for questions. So
Yeah, absolutely.
those were our topics. So
No questions. I'll ask a question.
we answered them all.
So, okay, if there's no questions, the one thing that I thought we had more time that I really wanted to get to is you have to have someone that you can be truly honest with, and when things really suck, that you can talk to and say, this is where I'm feeling right now, and this is what I'm at. And because you're going to always have this pressure on you to feel like you have to be this smiling, happy, candidate, right, all the time. And you have to identify someone that you can call when you're having those hard days and talk to. I was very fortunate that I had a great campaign manager that was kind of that sounding board for me. It wasn't stuff that I felt comfortable talking with my spouse about, because I know, she was going through it too. And so we were in a spot where she could be that, I could say all the frustrating things I was dealing with. So especially if it's going to be a higher profile campaign, find someone, whether it's a friend or your campaign manager, that can kind of be your emotional support and be there to be that sounding board and just hear you out when, the opposition sends out a nasty mailer or people make awful comments on Facebook or blogs or whatever it is. 'Cause it'll, if it's a visible race, it's going to happen. So have that support system in place.
Very shy crowd this evening, I guess. So I'll ask a question. What would be the single most important advice you'd give to someone who's actually decided to run for office? You've already decided they're going to run. What's the single most important advice you'd give them?
The single most.
I'll go. You're right.
Go ahead.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. And, you're going to need to ask people for two things. You're going to have to ask for their time, and you're going to have to ask for their money. And recognize that people view those things very differently. For me, time, I'm busy, so time is way more valuable to me. I'm much more likely to write someone a check than I am to go out and wave signs all day. But other people are totally different. I had people some just great new friends that I made that came along during the campaign and helped me put up signs. They didn't have the means to be able to write a check to help out, but them putting up 4x8 signs, when it was still raining in March and miserable, that was just as valuable as the people that could write a $1,000 check and not think of it. So know that those are the two things that you're going to need to be successful, and know that just because one might seem like a harder ask to you, that's not how other people are going to view it. So if someone can't give you money, ask for their time, and the other way around too.
And I would say, I think I alluded to it, and like we're going to have a question, but I think don't underestimate the amount of time it takes. Assuming you are doing this because you enjoy getting out, and hopefully you do, and meeting people and going to events, there's just a lot of time involved in that.
Well, thank you very much, both John Blum and
want
Jane
to-
Van Dyke.
We have
We did have a question. Yeah, question. So for our CVTV folks, the question is, how did you guys find that campaign manager, that person you could turn to and talk about the tough part of a campaign or advise you on campaign strategy?
Well, I'll say back at my very first campaign, I was encouraged by someone that had been very active in local politics, and so he happened to be, he came to me because he knew about my interest and said he would help me if I was willing to run and be interested in running. So sometimes it works the other way around.
And for me, it's very much just a personal sphere connection. I had gone through Leadership Clark County with someone who's involved with a media group that did campaigns. And so when I made the decision to run, the first thing I did was call up my classmate from Leadership Clark County and say, hey, I'm thinking about running. Can I sit down and talk with you guys about this? And it ended up working
What
out.
an excellent question as we transition to our next panel of campaign managers. So thank you for that. So
And thank you
again,
all for
Jane
coming.
and John, thank you very much. And I hope you guys can stick around a little bit afterwards. We'll have a little informal reception afterwards. So while our next panelists are working their way up, I would also bring your attention to this handout that was available to you on the back table called Assessing Your Candidacy. And what I find interesting about these questions is that when I personally took this, filled this out in 1998, I didn't do very well. But the areas that I didn't do very well in were areas that I felt I could work on and improve during the campaign. And the areas I did well on were areas I didn't think that my opponent could address during the campaign. So It's old. It's from 1993, but I still think it's pretty interesting. So, our next panelists, we're very pleased to have back with us again for more years than I can probably count. Jim Maines with the Hi-Fi Media Group. Jim is the partner and director of Hi-Fi Media, owner of, is my mic, did it die? Okay. Is state manager for, yeah, I guess. Okay. Works as state manager for the Ed Lynch Estate and vice president of Identity Clark County. One of the interesting things at this point in time for Jim, that of the 12 people who serve on the Vancouver City Council or the Clark County Board of Councilors, Jim has been the campaign manager, worked in the campaigns for 9 of those 12 people. Also joining us this year for the first time is Katie Archer, partner and director, Katie's a political consultant, licensed attorney, owner of Archer Public Affairs. Really pleased to have Katie here this evening. She is the driving force behind what I think was a remarkable achievement last fall when voters in the city of Vancouver passed a property tax to provide funding for the homeless issue in our community, Proposition 1. So, Katie, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Make sure our mics are working. Usually I don't have a problem with that. So I'm going to start off. Jim and I have known each other actually for several years now. So it was fun to meet and divvy up the workload for this. I'm going to tackle developing your message and then also the building your campaign portions of this. Jim's going to keep me on time. So the first thing I always tell candidates or anyone that's in the public eye is that you should always have your short message, which is something that you can develop by defining what your past is, what you're proud of there, who you are now as a person. Maybe that relates to your job, maybe that relates to your role in your family, maybe that relates to what you volunteer with in the community. And then also, what do you stand for? Are you big on property rights? Are you, do you volunteer with the homeless? Do you work in your church? Those types of activities, what you're already invested in, are going to be part of what I call your short message. And it's mainly used for introductions and networking. As a candidate, you will do this everywhere you go. Grocery stores, walking into the DMV, pretty much you're always a candidate if you're out in the public. And that's, I think, what Jane and John also alluded to, is that, you know, Costco, you don't take off your candidate hat when you're out and about. So you want to come up with, what I tell candidates is a list about 4 or 5 relatable things about yourself to be able to network a room. And also if you're at a meeting for the first time, so if you've been invited to go to your local party or LD meeting, maybe not dive into your platform right away. Really give people a chance to get to know you a little bit better first. So as an example, I put my bio on the 3rd page of that little handout I have. But I always like to start when I'm out and about by saying I'm 3rd generation Vancouver on both sides of my family. It's amazing how often that just gets a conversation started. It's relatable even for people who have just moved here. And you don't have to have that same thing, but it has nothing to do with politics. But it allows people to get a general sense of who I am right off the bat. And then it can also be, once you have that list of your short message about who you are, that can be used in written form too. So your Facebook page, which Jim's going to talk about, it can be these little bios. So when you're being introduced at different places, to have that, which again is not about policy, it's about who you are. But it should be relatable. It doesn't have to be those, like, you know, quirky little things that sometimes people tell you to put on the bottom of a resume. It should be, you know, relatable to the audience, and I'll get to that as well. Longer is your platform issues. This is your, what I call your long message. You have to have this as a candidate. You can't just wing this. You are going to have to make a list of your top priority issues. So start with those top 5 platform issues. You know, here locally, just to rattle off a few ideas, is it the bridge? Is it funding education first? Is it property taxes? Is it environmental causes with the port? And you know, where do you fall on those? Because those are the major issues that are found in the Columbian newspaper on a weekly basis. So you should be tracking that and decide how you're going to talk about those larger issues, and then of course how it pertains to the jurisdiction that you're actually running in. So if you're up in Richfield, you know, maybe you should know about what is going on with the Vancouver port, but you should absolutely know what's going on with the Richfield port if that's what you're running for. So some of the outline I put together is, you know, that what are the major issues facing your jurisdiction? You should be able to give an overview and also a history of that if you're asked, because you don't want to be caught off guard. If you're talking about it and you get an audience member to ask you, you should have an intelligent response, at least in your head, so that, especially on these big issues. And then you should also know and identify current legislation, votes by the boards, depending on your jurisdiction you're running for, and ordinances regarding that issue. Past, what's in the works now, and also what should be happening in your opinion in the future. You should be able to tell a story about those issues. So a relatable story about why you care about it, what motivated you to run for office, and how that relates to that issue. Because if you can do that, then you can connect with people in the crowd that you're speaking with, because you don't want to come off as you're up here. You want to come off as you're just like everybody else in the crowd, and that's why you got involved. And then this is the key. You have to have solutions. That's why you're running for office. I have seen this happen probably too often to, you know, that I like to admit with candidates, is they get up and they're like, I'm against this, I'm for this, I hate this, I love this. And then when someone says, all right, well, what are you going to do about it? They got nothing. And that is problematic. So if you're going to be talking about taxes, you need to have a tax plan in place about what those changes are. If you're going to be talking about education issues and you're not a teacher, you should probably be speaking to teachers about those issues and get a really comprehensive idea about what you're talking about. Because you're going to have to be a jack of all trades, in a sense, as a candidate. Preparing detailed plans will make you the difference between people will be winning that vote and seeming like you know what you're talking about, and people being kind of put off by you because you clearly didn't understand the issue very well. And then finally on this topic, know your audience. This is another one where I see candidates do this all the time, is know your audience. So if you're talking to the Chamber of Commerce, you know, let's keep in mind who that audience is. These are business owners. These are taxpayers. These are people who know what the B&O tax is. You should know what that is as well. And if you're in front of labor, then make sure you're talking about labor-friendly issues as well. This does not mean that you pander to anyone. The key is marrying up what you care about, what your values are, and how that, even if it's only a small slice, how that matches to your audience as well. The other thing is time allotment, which we all struggle with when we're up here. But you need to be courteous, so always make sure that you check in. If it's a walk-in, you check in with the host. Do I have 3 minutes? Do I have 10 minutes? And if you've been invited, you need to be clear about how long you've been given, because there's nothing worse than losing an audience because you're droning on and on. So moving on, Building a campaign organization. For those of you who didn't get the handout that I had, I made a visual. And there's two types in what we call the traditional hierarchy, and that's your regular management style, top-down, campaign manager in the center. And really that relieves a lot of stress for your candidate because your campaign manager is going to be fielding a lot of the coordination, the emails coming in, the phone calls, and your candidate's actually doing candidate work, doorbelling, forums, out in the public. And then the second one is the spoken wheel. I often see this with smaller campaigns that can't afford a campaign manager or do not have that direct person. It's usually for smaller jurisdictions as well. The candidate is pretty much the centerpiece of that. They're doing everything and they're communicating with everyone. I've listed some pros and cons there, and I'm happy to go through that afterwards at the reception a little bit more with people. As well, but that it will work because everybody's sharing information, where with the top down that sometimes isn't, but there are challenges with that because the candidate is so preoccupied sometimes with coordinating and not campaigning. And then finally, John alluded to this, the kitchen cabinet. That's your trusted advisors. You need one. No matter what hierarchy you choose, you have to have a kitchen cabinet of people that you can trust and can advise you on everything. So with that, I'll pass it on to Jim.
All righty. I will cruise through this pretty fast. So at the end, okay, never mind. Greg's saying, take your time. He's giving us 20 extra minutes. All right, so we're going to talk about fundraising. And just to let you know, there's a lot of firsts with fundraising. First, it's not easy. And it's the first thing you're going to want to do is work with the inner circle. As Katie just mentioned, when you're forming that campaign team, that kitchen cabinet, that's the people you're going to want to reach out to first. They're your closest supporters. They're going to be your family. They're going to be your friends. They're going to be the people that believe in you. And usually it's a pretty small group. So what we tell candidates, you're going to have to get some major money from that group because it shows, one, that they think you're legit. Mm-hmm. If they don't give you a lot of money, then you might want to reconsider if you really should be running. Because if they're going to have a hard time supporting you, then maybe, the larger community might have a hard time. Another first, you need to get your BREs. Some people call them remit envelopes or business reply envelopes. They're those small little envelopes that you flip open and has all the information that the donor can fill out. You want to get those printed right away. And so when you're out and about, you want to keep a bunch in your pocket. We have our candidates have these little kits, or John Blom had the whole back of his car. But basically, in your little kit, you want to have your buttons and your envelopes and all that stuff so you can take it with you wherever you go. So again, you always start with that inner circle. That's where you really try to push for support early on. Then you want to move out to maybe your church. If you go to church, maybe your church friends. Maybe if there's a club you belong to, any types of hobby groups. That's where you slowly start kind of letting people know, hey, I'm thinking of running, or I am running, wherever you are along that journey, and you ask for their support and you want to hand out those envelopes. Another first, you want to create right away a campaign budget. Mm-hmm. So you want to set goals, how you plan to reach that budget. You can have kind of the big dream budget. You can also have kind of the more realistic budget. But then you want to figure out, okay, this is how much I have to bring in this month. This is how much I have to bring in. Maybe you can have weekly goals. But you want to set that up at the same time setting up a fundraising team. Mm-hmm. All right, so that team, you'll have someone that hopefully will be your treasurer, that they know finances. And there are people that you can work with, and they can kind of hold you accountable to your budget, to your timeline. That's very helpful. Now, on a local level, fundraising or fundraisers, the actual event, they are nice, but don't expect them to bring in a ton of money. Mm-hmm. All right, a lot of times people think, I'm going to have a fundraiser, and then they just feel like deflated when they don't raise a lot of money out of that fundraiser. For some reason, locally, the one-on-one, we're finding more and more the fundraising letters, we call them ask letters, sitting down with somebody in that one-on-one environment and having that hard ask, saying, hey, will you support me, giving them that time. A lot of people nowadays would rather just write a check and support you than spending 2-3 hours in an evening when there's so many competing events going on just here locally in our community. But fundraisers are a great place to capture kind of that rally experience, get people on board. You can have signups. At all of our events, we have sign-up forms. Hey, we need people to help us with signs. We need people to help us doorbell. I mean, that's where you can really work with some of those or bring in those worker bees to help you. So those areas are very important. Again, I'm just kind of touching the surface with fundraising. But finally, something that you learn from second grade, thank yous, right? Thank you cards are so important. It's actually the second thing we send to the printer after the BREs. So we send in for the business return envelopes, and then we send in thank you cards because you want thank you cards on hand. And then find someone in the campaign. It doesn't always have to be the campaign manager. It could be their spouse. It could be someone else within the campaign that's their one job is to respond to to write the thank yous. And you can thank, of course, for donations, thank for the volunteer work. I mean, there's a list of stuff to thank for. And when you do send out those thank yous, it goes a long way. So social media, and we're going to both answer questions hopefully here quickly at the end. So social media, when Greg asked me to speak here 6 years ago, social media was so new. And I remember asking people, how many people are on MySpace? Do you remember that? How many people are on Facebook and Twitter? And what was shocking, a lot of people, they weren't on it. But I bet if I asked you today, how many are on, well, maybe not MySpace, but Facebook, Twitter, even Instagram, it's now kind of a part of our culture. It's a part of our daily life. And it's so important to look at social media, but from a campaign standpoint, there's so many options. We like to tell people here in Clark County, Facebook is still king. Facebook is the place to be. It's the most used demographic for the age group that you're going to want to reach. Although the 25-year and younger are moving to like Snapchat and Instagram, they're hugely growing because Facebook's doing so many ads. It's kind of turning off the younger generation. Facebook is the place you want to be, and that's where I always tell people that's where you should start. Most users, or the most user age group in Clark County is about 40 plus. When I first started here, it was like 26 to 35. So it does show it's changing. So now the 40-year-old and older are on Facebook. The fastest growing demographic after 4 years is still the over 60. So they're still getting on there. Now granted, that's slowed down in recent years, but with 2 billion users a month, they're going to run out of growth sooner or later. So think about that. Facebook is huge. In the 2013 primary, 79% of voters were 50 years old or older. Okay? 27% were 70 years old or older. There were more voters over the age of 70 than under the age of 40. Think about that. So talking about reaching people on social media, the first thing you want to do is have your website. That's your staple. We tell people that's kind of like the brochures. When Jane Van Dyke first started, she probably had brochures. Now, no more brochures. It's your website. And the average length that people stay on a website is about 20 seconds. So, I mean, it's quick. So you want to grab them. You want to have right there on that homepage something for them to do. Addresses are always the number one, and phone numbers, but also that donate button. You want that up there so people see it and can find it. And your website doesn't really change. That's where you have your bio, all of your information, your platforms, as Kay was explaining, all that information you want to keep there. You're not going to change it a lot. Facebook and social media, that's where you have kind of that fluid, ever-changing. That's where people are going to go to see you in that personal light. They're going to stay on Facebook an average of 2 minutes, especially if there's personal information, because they're going to want to scroll down and learn about you. If you put videos on Facebook, they're even going to stay longer. We don't have time to talk video right now, but people really want to know who you are as a candidate through your posts. And it's very easy, because I don't want to confuse you, your campaign Facebook is not your personal Facebook. You can have both, and for a while, a lot of candidates would even put in their voter guide statement where you can find their personal page and where you can find their public page. What we recommend is just to have a strong candidate page. It's easy to create. You just Google create a Facebook page, and it'll pop up, and it'll give you the options. It'll walk you through it on Facebook, and it's pretty easy to do. Your page will be connected through your personal page, and that's how you're going to access that page. You're going to want to always engage your friends. You want to engage the people around you with your posts. One thing we recommend is the 90-10 rule. So you want to post 90% of your posts should be personal. And by personal, I mean sharing your values, your beliefs, issues about the campaign or issues related to you, and that everyday stuff. 10% is the pitch, right? Give me money. I need volunteers. Put up signs. So the 90-10 rule is very helpful when you do that. And then there's a lot of things we could talk about with advertising, but I don't have to get into that right now. But the key is you have to pay to play. All right? If you don't pay for advertising on Facebook or even boosting your posts, you will only reach 20% of your followers. So if you want to get outside of that, then you want to pay, and there's a lot of different ways you can kind of strategize on how you want to spend your money and how you want to do it versus boosting posts, paying for ads. What we recommend is you always want to push people to get through to your website so you can have a post, have a link to your website, so at least that they're going through to look at that brochure, right? All that information about you that they can find. So with that, I'm going to tell you quickly the dangers of social media. One, your posts will never go away. They're always there. Facebook, you can end up, and maybe Lauren's going to talk about this, but whatever you post on Facebook could end up in the media. And we've had a lot of candidates where they've done that, where they've made some kind of post, and all of a sudden, there it is as a quote in the Columbian. Always think about what you post. Never post late at night or when you're angry, although we have a president that kind of threw that one out with the water. And then finally, when you do check in somewhere, make sure your home is secure. A lot of people don't think about that. Now you can check in all over the place. Well, then people know that you're not at your house. So you want to make sure that someone's at your house or you have video cameras or something like that, or just post at the end of the day as a wrap up. You know, here's all the things I did today. All right? We're out of here.
That was good.
That was fast. Sorry.
Thank you very much,
Intense.
both you guys. A couple of questions. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Oh,
Is there any other media that makes sense? Columbian, television, radio?
Well,
so the question, just repeat the question.
So is there any other media that makes sense? Columbian, television, radio?
yeah, television, you should know that the packages start at about $25,000 just to get in the door with television. But the Columbian ads are, and this is not a pitch, but that's what we use. They're much more affordable. There's also there's the Daily Insider, there's the Reflector, there's several media options there. And then you can also use the letter to the editors as a good way of getting more messaging out from a different perspective of a supporter.
Very much.
Okay.
All of the above.
Anything else? Oh, good. I think we're going to wrap that up.
All right.
Katie, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But that was another excellent question to transition to our next panelist. So every candidate is going to have to interact not just with social media, but with do I call it the real media, traditional media? I don't know.
Public
But-
enemy number one.
No.
No, we're not.
So every candidate is going to interact with the news media, one sort or another, and so really pleased to have with us this evening Lauren Dake, who covers city and state politics for the Columbian. Prior to that, she covered state politics in Salem. So, Lauren, tell us what candidates need to know on how to interact with the media.
Okay, hi. I like usually being on the other end of this where I ask you questions, but I think I'm going to give you a lot of really basic tips. But before I do that, I want to say that there's a lot of scrutiny with the media right now, which is understandable and deserved. But I want to tell you that all the reporters at the Columbian are there not to get rich. I know that's what you think, but we're actually there because we believe in the mission of a community newspaper. And one of those primary missions is really that an informed electorate makes a better democracy. And so, you might pick up the paper and think, oh, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. Our goal truly is to give readers context and real information so that they can make a smart decision when they're filling out their ballot. So just so you kind of know really where we're coming from. So some tips. First, tip number one is when you're sending a press release, maybe announcing your candidacy or an event that's coming up, make sure that you send it when you're available to talk. So you don't send out some great news and then we get it, we want to talk to you immediately, and we can't reach you. If you're not going to be available, maybe you could say, this is a good time, this is my number, here's the best numbers to reach us. Just make it easy for us to reach you, because I think that always helps. If you want to hear a groan throughout the newsroom, send that press release at 4:30 on a Friday. It's better to send it early so that we have time to call you, to maybe call some other sources, so that we're not on deadline for numerous other stories, so that we have a little bit more time to dedicate to your message. And I think it's always helpful to find out who's covering your race. So I cover Vancouver City Council and state legislative races. We have different reporters that cover education, school board type races, or the county races as well. So find out who's covering your race. We have, the masthead in the paper and online. All our names are there with our emails and our direct lines. But just so you know, everybody's email at the Columbian is their first name dot last name at columbian.com. So that makes it kind of easy. We also actually cannot check our work email when it's outside of work hours. So a really good email to have is metrodesk@columbian.com. So if there's something really urgent that you want to get to the paper, that's a good way to reach people quickly. There's editors that check it, or the reporter on staff on weekends checks that account. When you're sending a press release, it's helpful to give a lot of biographical information. So give us your name, your age, your occupation, your education, maybe some relevant community service or past political posts. Anything that you think will just help give us a fuller picture is incredibly helpful. And then this really touches a lot on what Katie's already mentioned, but know your position, know what you're running for, know your platform, so that you can be articulate and specific when we talk on the phone. If you're running for county auditor, I'm probably not going to ask you if you think that the Affordable Care Act should be repealed. If you're running for Vancouver City Council, I might ask you about what you think of the oil terminal or what you think of the affordable housing situation. But I'm not going to ask you how you think we should solve the McCleary case. So really just know what race you're running for, and then also, like Katie said, be specific with your solutions. What distinguishes you as a candidate? What gives you ideas that a voter that would help make a voter make a decision between Michelle or Jim? And then, again, Katie kind of touched on this, but it really is helpful to humanize yourself. So if mental health issues are an issue that's close to your heart, let me know why. What in your background has inspired you or compelled you to make that one of your platforms, and what solutions you have to maybe improve the mental health system. I just think if you're accessible and you're articulate, you'll do a better job of getting your point across to me, and that will help me do a better job getting your point across to our readers. So hopefully you all know the difference between the news side of the newspaper and the editorial side of the newspaper. I think they often get confused, but I want to make it really clear that there is a difference. I often sit in the editorial board meetings, which is where you'll go and talk to Greg Jane, former Metro editor Lou Brancasio, our current Metro editor Craig Brown, and the paper's publishers and owners, Scott and Jody Campbell. They're the ones who are going to endorse you. They will form an opinion based on your conversation with them. I have no role in their endorsement, and they have no role in my news coverage. So I think that's important to mention. But I did reach out to Greg Jane because I think you probably have some questions about how that works. He's the editorial editor, and he basically will contact you once you file for candidacy. His first advice is, once he contacts you and has a meeting, is trying to set up a meeting to meet with him. A lot of candidates don't meet with them, and you can kind of go through and look at who doesn't make it past the primary. And most candidates that decline to meet with the editorial board don't don't make it past the primary. You can disagree with everything that the editorial board has ever written, but meet with them and show them prove why you disagree with them. You're going to have to engage with people who don't agree with you all the time when you're a candidate, when you're elected. So it's an important skill. Let's see. I think one of the last tips is, if you're a challenger, make sure you can really distinguish yourself from the incumbent. Incumbents have a huge advantage because they've been doing the job. They have name recognition. People have heard of them. What are you going to do that's going to separate yourself from that person? What makes your solutions better? And then persuade the editorial board as to why. Okay, so roles reversed. You can grill me now. Go ahead.
Hypothetically, I'm a campaign manager for an election, no name, no recognition. I want to make sure that you come to, say, a kickoff. What kind of information are you going to be looking for, such as expected crowd size, what have you, to get your attention so that you will want to come?
So the question was, what can you do to get a candidate who's not very well known? How can you get attention for a campaign kickoff event, right? That's a hard one because truly not every campaign kickoff event is news. And we're not going to go to every campaign kickoff event. We have limited resources, and we have to constantly use our news judgment as to how to use those. So I guess first, don't take it personally if we don't go. But I would still love the information. And we have roundup briefs that we write in the paper all the time, alerting the public that, John Smith is holding a campaign event. And what's crucial to include in those is the name of the candidate, the time, the date, the place of the event. Those are the main things. What the candidate's running for, if somebody's sponsoring it, or if they're talking about a specific issue at that event. That's helpful. Crowd size isn't really isn't as necessary, but. Any other questions?
A couple of years ago, you folks said that anybody who produces something newsworthy is going to get in the paper. And true to your word, this knucklehead Don Benton, it seemed like you covered him every day. It seemed like in that same time period, there were lots of candidates out there. They didn't seem to get much ink. Did they just not generate anything that was newsworthy?
Lauren, can you summarize the question?
We write about Don Benton a lot. We don't always dedicate as many resources to some of the other candidates. Is that fair? And why?
But what is newsworthy?
Well, Don Benton is newsworthy. I mean, constantly newsworthy. To this day, he's still very, very newsworthy. And that could be frustrating, I could see, for somebody who's trying to get their name out there. But we do have to make a judgment constantly, every single day, on stories, what to cover, and where the news judgment, and where the readers' interests are, and if it's important that they know what's happening. I mean, Don Benton has been newsworthy for decades because he's served in the state legislature for decades. So for a long time, he's been a public official. One of our primary duties is to hold public officials accountable. So once you're elected, you're automatically pretty newsworthy. I don't know.
Okay, so other folks just didn't do anything newsworthy.
What other, I mean, it's hard to say what other folks you're talking about, but.
I don't really have any specifics, but it just seemed like didn't see much of anybody else in either party.
Well, I think we'll summarize with your last statement, Lauren, which It's a tough decision, but ultimately it's the newspaper editors and the reporters' decision about what is newsworthy and what's not newsworthy, what's of the public's interest and what's not of the public's interest. So glad I don't have to make that decision every single day. So, Lauren, thank you very much for your participation. All right, so now we come to the part of the evening where the whole purpose of this is to get you here to listen to these folks about the process of getting your name on the ballot and how you participated in the voters pamphlet. And immediately prior to that, we have a speaker from the League of Women Voters, Judy Hudson, who, after retiring from the Evergreen School District, has become very involved in community affairs. And Judy's going to speak about the League of Women Voters Fair Campaign Practices Act.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who's working on a campaign or who's running for office, because there was an article about a year ago in the Atlantic magazine that said that where this couple went all over the United States to see why some cities run and some cities don't do it. And they found out it's the local leadership, the local elected people that make the difference, that have the vision, that try to make things happen, try to maintain so you have a very livable community. So the quality of life that we depend on in Clark County is going to depend on those of you who run and get elected for office. The League of Women Voters, I guess, is like the company. We want people to be informed, and we want them to vote. And of course, sometimes we're frustrated because we wish more people would get out and vote. But I would say the League of Women Voters of Clark County spend 95% of their time out working on voter service. And we're nonpartisan. I'm voter service chair, so I don't participate in candidates or endorse or anything like that. Same way with our president, because we're really committed to this. Tonight, I'm going to talk about something that League sponsors. And we're one of the groups that really are working on civility and try to have good campaigns. And it's called the Fair Campaign Practices Project. And a booklet like this is on our website. And the way you get, and all our materials have the website one, but it's LWVWA. We go through the Washington State one. LWVWA.org/Clark. And you can get in and get the whole copy of this. You will get a copy when you file of the pledge, and we'd like to encourage everybody to do it. So what is the Fair Campaign Practice? It's really broken down into two parts. It's broken down into a pledge, and it's a pretty serious pledge, and we've been really thrilled because most candidates read it and sign it and really believe in it and do it. And it means that your campaign is, you're going to conduct it in an honorable manner. You're not going to, if somebody comes out that works on your campaign or something and says something that's misleading or not true or defamatory, and so that you will, what you say and what you do and what your campaign says and do really counts. So you need to do that, and you're not going to have people in your campaign distort it. Also, what's kind of hard nowadays, because other groups will come in and say things against your opponent, and you need to say, I don't agree with that, and run good campaigns. So this is the first one. It will be in your packet when you file for election. The second part is calling it's a committee. And it's the campaign committee, and what it does is if you decide that your opponent is not following through on having a good, honest, clean, truthful campaign, and they're really saying terrible things about you or that, then you can file a complaint, and it's in the packet, and they tell you the process, and there's a 5-person committee, and it'll be two people in League that are nonpartisan, don't participate in campaigns of that, and 3 community people that are not involved that will sit down and judge it. And really the consequences of it will go to the media if, they find that these are true. So this is kind of basically, I guess we'll be here a little bit later, so if you have any questions, but if you go onto the website and get it, it will really explain it well.
Great, thank you so much, Judy. And then wrapping up the evening, we have Kathy Garber, Elections Director. Kathy's been with us here at Clark County for 7 years. Prior to that, she was the county clerk in Clatsop County, Oregon. And Rich Cooper, the Elections Coordinator, who has been working here almost half his life. He has been here 14 years. So, Kathy and Rich, thank you.
Great, well, thank you. Well, hi, so tonight, Rich and I, we're going to provide you the basic essentials for filing for office. We're going to talk about how and where to file, the positions that are open for filing, qualifications to run for a particular office, deadlines for your paperwork, how the top 2 primary works, maps that are available for your use, the precinct changes that we've made this year, our candidate guideline booklet, and voters pamphlet statements, photos, and specifications and their deadlines. And then we'll also go over our website resources and resources available for you in our office. So first of all, how to file. So starting May 15th, Monday, May 15th through Friday, May 19th, you can file. There's 3 different ways. The first way would be in person. Come to our office at 1408 Franklin, file your declaration, paperwork, and any applicable filing fees. Another way is to file online. You can go to clarkvotes.org, our website, and as long as you have a valid email address and you are qualified and live in the jurisdiction you're filing for, you can file online. And if there's any filing fee, then you would need to pay that by credit card. The third way is by mail. We are already accepting declarations of candidacy through the close of business on May 19th. You just send it to your declaration and any applicable filing fee to P.O. Box 8815, Vancouver, Washington 98666, and you would write a check payable to the Elections Reserve Fund. So this year is a very busy election year. Special district elections are very complex for us. There are many ballot styles that we create, and this year there are over 80 special purpose district positions up for election. Now, all of these positions are filed with us at Clark County Elections, and there are city and town council districts. There's a mayor race for City of Washougal and City of Vancouver. We have school district board positions, port commissioner positions, fire board, cemetery board, and regional wastewater commissioner positions. So it's quite a long list.
Okay, and some qualifications to be a candidate. First of all candidates must be a registered voter of the district at the time of filing and possess all the qualifications specified by law for that position. Candidates for Port Commission must live within internal commission districts, and candidates for school district director positions must live within internal school district director boundaries they are filing for, except for Vancouver and Green Mountain School District, which are elected at large. Filing fees are the equivalent of 1% of the annual salary. It's cash or check only if you're filing in person, and you can use a credit or debit card if you file online. Filing fees are non-refundable. The other option for a filing fee is what's called a filing fee petition, which is available for people lacking funds to pay for the fee. To do that is 1 signature per dollar of the filing fee. The signatures must be gathered from registered voters in the district in which you are filing for. We recommend that you have a 25% overage on any of those because it's very common. Some of those signatures are going to be invalid. They're going to be duplicate voters, not registered voters, or they don't live in that district. Filing opens Monday, May 15th at 8 a.m. if you're filing in person and 9 a.m. if you're filing online. The last day to file for office is Friday, May 19th at 4 p.m. if you're filing online and 5 p.m. if you're filing in person. The last day to withdraw for office is Monday, May 22nd at 5 o'clock. And new this year, you can either do that in person or you can send it electronically to us. There is something called a special 3-day filing period, which occurs if after the last day to withdraw for office, a void in candidacy is available, meaning nobody's filed for that office. If that is to occur, then we'll set a special 3-day filing period at a later point to get someone hopefully to file for that office. Washington is the top 2 primary state, meaning the top 2 candidates receiving the most votes in the primary move on to the general election regardless of political party. All races this year are nonpartisan. And if there's 2 or less candidates filed for any office, there is no primary for that race. There's only a general election. After close of business on Friday, we hold what's called a lot draw, which will determine the order in which the candidates will appear on either the primary ballot if they're eligible for the primary or for the general if they skip the primary.
So we have maps available on our website at clarkvotes.org for your use. We have congressional, legislative, county council, districts, and precinct maps. They are available in PDF format if you'd like to print them out. You can also purchase poster-sized maps from the GIS store located on the 2nd floor of the Public Service Center. These maps are generally available about 24 hours after you order them, and you can get black or white or color, and they're around $96 plus tax. This year, we've made a lot of precinct changes. We had an additional 25 precincts added, and we had several other precincts that required boundary adjustments. And these changes were made because we had about 20,000 people that either updated their voter registration and moved, or we had over 15,000 people that registered for the first time for the presidential. Now, state law requires that if a precinct must be entirely inside a city limit or entirely outside. So we had annexations that occurred this year with the city of La Center, Ridgefield, Battleground, and Vancouver. So a lot of the precincts, some of the precincts were changed due to that, but most of them were due to the influx of new voters. We also had a merger of Fire District 2 with Clark County Fire and Rescue, and that caused some boundary line adjustments. But all of our new precincts and their maps are located on our website, so you could find those out. We also have something very important here. This is our guidelines booklet. This is provided to you along with some other information when you file for office. If you choose to file online or by mail, we will mail these to you. The booklets are also, they can be downloaded at clarkvotes.org under the candidate menu. We do have some available in the back of the room right now, so if you would like, you are free to take one. If you come in person and you've already taken one, please let our staff know that you already have one, because we do have a limited supply. So items that are in the guideline booklet. There are the list of all the open offices, the current position holders, their salaries, their filing fees, their terms of office, and the residency requirements. It has a breakdown of all the filing periods and the deadlines. There are some important election dates in there too. The voter registration cutoff, when ballots are mailed, election dates, certification dates, and information about Washington state laws regarding campaign violations. We also have information about registered voter and election return data. Many candidates find it useful to purchase a download, which is a list of registered voters, and it can be the whole county or just the jurisdiction that is specific to you, and that is $12.50. You can also purchase a matchback, and a matchback is a daily report of who has returned their ballots at the starting with the beginning of the election, and it goes every day. You also, at the beginning of that, you would get a download of all the voters, and then after we certify the election, you would get another complete download. And this is $50, but it's for the entire election cycle, and you do get the daily report of ballots that are returned.
Okay, some other things inside the guideline book are your public disclosure filing requirements, your political sign regulations, information from Clark County, the Washington Department of Transportation, and all cities, forms from Clark County, City of Vancouver, and the City of Washougal. Questions regarding any sign placement, please call the jurisdiction you're going to place it in. We don't handle whether it can be placed there or not. It's up to the jurisdiction. It also has the rules on your voter's pamphlet, statement, and photo. Candidate statement, specifications, etc. Statement lengths, you're allowed 200 words for your candidate statement, Any hyphenated words inside your statement count as multiple words. So although Microsoft word count is helpful, if you have hyphenated words, it only counts as one word, but we're going to count it as two. So don't rely on it 100%. Candidates will also be allowed to submit 100 words of biographical information into 4 categories. It's under elected or judicial experience, education, community service, and other professional experience. Information that's listed after the heading must be relevant to the title. Statement content must be about yourself, not about your opponent. Contact information is limited to a campaign address, an email address, and a website address. Candidates must follow the formatting outlined in the book. Once submitted, all information is considered final and cannot be edited. Submissions cannot be revised by the candidate. Spelling errors, grammatical errors, or any other typos will not be corrected. Make sure you proof your statements and your biographies before you submit them to us. Candidate photos, there should be a head and shoulder photo, should be a color photo taken within the last 5 years, and it cannot contain a uniform, judicial robes, or insignia suggesting that you hold a public office. All candidates are strongly encouraged to submit a statement and photograph. It's your opportunity to send a statement to every voter, and it's a free service to all candidates. All this information we just went over can be found on our website, which is clarkvotes.org. It has our candidate page, which has open offices, election steps for candidates, getting elected into office, starting off on the right foot, guidelines, voters pamphlet specifications, and historical data back to 1997, including precinct by precinct results.
So now Rich and I would like to invite you to ask any questions you may have. Oh,
We can go 2 years in a row.
we must have answered all your questions.
I just have a comment that you have done such a wonderful job putting this information together and continuing to do this for the public that on behalf of myself and the others who work in this industry, we thank you for doing this.
Well, we'll always take kudos, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions? Any other kudos? We'll take those too. Well, I want to thank you, Judy, Kathy, and Rich. In wrapping this up, I want to first thank all of you for taking the time to be here this evening. Thank you to the CVTV audience for watching this. I want to put in a strong urge, to strongly urge you as a candidate, if you do become a candidate, take the time to read through the candidate guideline booklet, take the time to read through the PDC information. I think you'll find during the course of the campaign, taking that couple hours up front to really be familiar with what those requirements are will pay off very well for you during that process. You do not want to be the candidate who Lauren Dake is calling up and saying, why is the PDC investigating you for that violation? You do not want to be the candidate calling us up and saying, you know, I thought I could send you my voters pamphlet statement next week, but why can't I get it in this week? So just, I would, again, strongly urge you to take the time to read those things. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. A big shout out to Clark Vancouver Television for covering this, as well as to the Columbian for their sponsorship. So thank you and good night.